Alright guys, so here's all the parts that we're going to be using. We're going to be replacing our transmission mount, and that is the part number. It'll all be in the description. Everything was bought over here from FCP Euro, awesome company. I'll leave a link to them. All of their stuff comes with a lifetime warranty and is factory replacement stuff. This came from Auto House, another great website. I'll leave a link to them. I had purchased this thinking that was my issue right when I got the car, and then I went on to further research and found out I might as well just change the flex disc, and that is the part number there. And like I said, these will all be in the description. This is our center support. Basically, it's like a rubber boot that goes around and then it bolts to the frame. And then our new bearing. We're also going to be using grease here, a synthetic grease to, well, this is a high pressure grease. I think this is extreme pressure grease. And a puller to pull our bearing. We're also going to be using some tools to hammer in the bearing that I actually was doing some research on how to get this out. And a gentleman named Cardiologist, and he has an awesome video too, taking it off of another Benz. But I got an idea from him for the puller from Harbor Freight, which I was planning on doing. And he used a pipe to hammer in the bearing, so we'll be doing that. So let's get back over to there and we'll start pulling the parts. And now we go to the fun part, which is removing the drive shaft. This part is only if you need to do your intermediate bearing and your center support. Obviously mine is gone. Now I went ahead and used a paint marker and drew a line down this, because this will come apart when you take it down, and they are balanced, so you want to make sure you line them back up. And then I also marked down here on each end of our flex disc. This way we can line those back up. Now we're going to be replacing those, but we can kind of take it off and mark it as we go for the new one. So these are, very fortunately, these are 19 millimeter. They're not a star head. I know some of the other cars out there use different bolts, but we're going to be able to get it with a 19 millimeter open end wrench on the back end and a 19 millimeter socket. A lot of people make it so that you can turn your drive shaft by lifting the wheels off the ground. But I think I can get into all of these on both ends of it without doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're going to keep our, basically our center support still in place. This is 13 millimeter bolts here. And we're going to let that be the last thing we bring down. And we're going to try to put some jack stands in there. And the last thing is, from what I've seen, you want to support your transmission. So I'm going to actually, I had this here, but I'm going to go put the jack there with a board underneath it and make sure that the transmission is supported when we pull out our drive shaft. I've already went ahead and dropped the transmission mount, but I'm going to wait to take this bolt off once we get this out, because it looks like it's going to be a lot easier to remove this transmission mount once we have our drive shaft out of the way. So let's go ahead and get the drive shaft out, and I'll fill you guys in once it's out. Great thing about doing these things is you learn something every day. Now, I said earlier you can leave the bolts that are holding the drive shaft to the flex disc on, and I failed to realize it's going to be very difficult now getting those off. I know I can do it. I'll probably get an impact or put it in a vise or something like that, and I've got a neighbor that can help me out with that. So I'll worry about those in a little bit. But right now, I want to show you guys what I just did that I think can help all of you. So I made this white line, and it's hard to really line that up when you have that big gap. So I went ahead, this pulls apart real easily, and as I was pulling it apart, I marked the actual thread part there. Now, of course, we're going to be greasing everything, and it might be a little difficult to see that later on, but I'm sure that's going to help line it up a little bit better, so we can make sure we balance this. So let's go ahead and pull these apart, and then I'm going to show you guys how we're going to pull the bearing out and how we're going to get the center support off and the new one put on. I'm also going to lay out all the parts so you guys can see what I picked up with part numbers. Okay, so we got our Harbor Freight puller all set up on the bearing, and I wanted to point something out. This bearing has this weird kind of crown on the top and bottom, and from what I've seen on other videos is most people are just pulling this bearing out and replacing it. So it's going to be interesting once I pull that off. This top part does not move, but this bottom part I'm able to spin freely. Oh, you got to make sure you secure this. I just wanted to show you guys how this goes on here. And then as it comes up the shaft, I found a 17 millimeter socket goes on there. We're just going to tighten this until this bearing pops off. So let me go ahead and set it up, and I'll show you guys how that goes. Well, I was getting ready to set it up to show you guys, but it only took a couple turns, and this piece came off freely, and the bearing, which is definitely shot, is coming off, and then this little bottom cap. So it almost seems like these are kind of like just a dust shield to keep stuff from getting into the bearing there after it's nice and set in there grease. So I'm probably going to reuse these just the way it was. That way it goes back on factory. So now let's go ahead and get set up to put the bearing back on. Alright guys, so this is my setup to get the bearing on. It's awesome having a neighbor who's an old school mechanic and has done this many times. So he basically told me, take your old bearing and slide it right on top. Now I ended up putting that kind of dust shield thing back on because I think that's going to help out keeping stuff out of the bearing. And then all I did was slide the new bearing on, the old bearing on top, and I found around the shop a pipe. Now the great thing about having the old bearing is if you slip and accidentally damage the bearing, it's going to be the old one. All honesty, he held it for me. I whacked it a good 3-4 times and just tapped it down, and the thing just slid right on. So it was a very, very easy thing to do, and I was worried that this is going to be the toughest part. So our next step is going to be to put our intermediate support. This is that rubber seal that kind of holds in, and take a look at the one that I pulled out. I mean, it was completely torn apart. And also, I wanted to mention this, there is a dust cover boot that will attach to right here, and when it slides together, it's going to cover this from getting dirt and stuff into the grease. I went ahead and ordered that. It wasn't in the car, so it wasn't a part that I ordered, so I've got that coming in tomorrow. So what we're going to do is get this slid on. I think I'm just going to grease it up, make sure you've got it on there the correct direction, and you can see if you need to get it hammered on, if you're not able to press it on by hand, you can use like a PVC pipe. Cardiologist YouTuber used a PVC pipe that fit perfectly on there, and I think it was like a 2 or 2.5 inch pipe, and then put electrical tape on it just to protect this because you don't want to damage this while hammering it on. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get that on there by just greasing it up a little bit, and then we're going to also put our new flex disc on before we install. So I told you guys earlier I took it down without taking the bolts off that hold the flex disc to our drive shaft. So you can either impact it off if you do the same thing as me. I'm actually just probably going to slide it back in the car, slide a bolt into the actual differential or transmission area, and then take those off so it stays in place. So let's go ahead and get all that set up, and I'll show you guys where we're at next. Okay, so while we're waiting for that boot to come in before we can slide all this back in, let's go ahead and take care of our flex disc, and we're also going to be doing the transmission mount. So this is our new flex disc. The old ones, they're kind of beat up. You know, you can tell they're probably original because they're kind of rough. I don't think they were causing any issues, but you don't want to spend all this time taking apart all this, putting it back in when you can easily replace. These were like 60 bucks each, so not super cheap, but well worth it in just the labor cost alone. So now these old flex discs, I went ahead and left the one bolt on there that we marked, and what I'm gonna do, I'm debating on using the new bolts that came with it because they're using like an Allen key head versus just a regular bolt head, and these bolts are pretty good. Always nice putting new hardware in, but I also enjoy just having a standard bolt head. So first thing is, these flex discs get kind of pounded into here. So I'm just gonna basically work my way around. Be very careful not to hit your drive shaft, but I'm just gonna kind of pull it apart, and you'll see there it finally went. And the other thing is, by having this bolt still in here, it allows me to keep that there. So now we're gonna take our old one. So it doesn't matter which way you put this, but keep in mind the things that do matter is you'll see this comes out. This is like your kind of washer sleeve here, bearing sleeve kind of thing. And then it's flat. So every other one comes out, and on the opposite side, it's exactly opposite. So what you want to have is the part that protrudes is going to go on like so. And when you tighten up these bolts, and you can actually press it in by just tapping it with your hand. That. And basically, once you tighten up the bolts, and make sure, the other thing is when you have the ones that are attached to the drive shaft, the washer is going to go on the back side and then your nut. And on the every other one, basically this is going to go into your differential or transmission. That one's going to have the washer on the bolt. So you're going to see the washer on the outside, and then you're basically just going to attach your nut on the back side here, like so. Just so you guys can see that it's going to be torqued to 60 Newton meters. So I'm going to put that over and over again in the notes. I'm going to convert that to foot-pounds for you as well. And I'm going to try to mention that as I'm putting it in, because these are things that people are probably going to be looking for. But just check into the notes. I'm going to probably put as much information as I can in there. All the parts numbers, links to other videos, as well as what the torque specs are for these. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now, I'm going to get the other flex disc on. I'm going to tighten up the bolts for here, and then we're going to go ahead and put the transmission mount in since we've got everything out of the way right now. So another reason why you always want to change out parts when you can. This is something I could not see in the car, and as you can see there, it's a pretty decent crack that's probably going to affect the vibration in the car, if not now, in the near future. So I'm very happy we're changing out all the flex discs. Alright guys, so moving on back to underneath the car, we've got our transmission mount. And like I was saying, this is the best way to take this off. We've got everything out of the way. All we've got now is a 19 millimeter bolt up on top here, and you can see how easy that is to access. There's one thing I really want to let you guys know. Make sure you wear goggles when underneath this car, because just banging stuff around, I've got stuff falling, and I wasn't using goggles right at the beginning, and I'm constantly getting hit in the goggles with pieces of dirt. So it's really good to wear protection on your hands, on your eyes, and all that stuff. But let's go ahead and pull this mount out. I don't think it's, you know, damaged or anything like that, but why not change it out? I think it was $20 to replace. So let's go ahead and get that out and get the new one put in. So that was a little more difficult to come off than I thought. I used a long, heavy-duty screwdriver flathead and kind of hammered the screwdriver up underneath it and pried it loose. It was really in there. I'm guessing it's definitely the original one. So when I pulled it down, I paid attention to see where these notches were, because I wanted to show you guys that. It's going to face towards the back of the car, so when you're sliding this in, those notches should be facing that direction like that. And that's just going to slide in and bolt down. There's a little metal plate. Make sure that's in place. And then I'll get you guys the torque specs. I'll put it on the screen now for you to put this in. All right, guys, so new day, but the boot came in, actually went down to Advanced Auto. This is the part number, $3.50, and they got it for me the next day. If I would have been there early enough, I would have got it that same day. So this is something they can get into any of those stores. That's the part number. It'll be in the description, guys. Also, I showed you earlier a different grease than I'm going to be using, but same concept. This is a full synthetic, and so the main thing about this is it's extreme protection for high temperatures, low temperatures. Now this is NLGI, and that is the part number there in case you want to get this exact grease. I'll leave that in the description. This is just Valvoline full synthetic. So first thing we're going to do is get our grease and heavily grease the inside of this one here. And the reason why I'm going to heavily grease the inside is because that's just going to connect to the outside of this. And I have a really nice marking down here. There's also a factory marking. Let's say you drop this whole thing down and then you started watching this video or another video. There's a factory marking, and so you can easily realign it. I'm going to show you guys that. I like the mark that I have as the initial mark because when I slide this down, it's going to line up perfectly. The boot is going to hide it a little bit, so it's going to be a little more difficult when we put the boot on. But all I'm going to do now is just some grease up top so I don't cover my white mark as I'm coming down, and this should easily work its way down and have tons and tons of grease. So let me go ahead and slide this on. Your boot is going to basically attach like that and slide on. So the wider part is going to go on this end here. The skinnier part is going to slide down the shaft. So let's go ahead and reconnect those now. Okay, I had to work this boot a little bit to get it on here and lining up the shaft, but I actually lined it up perfectly with our mark. Now let me go ahead and show you guys that factory lineup mark. You can see when you turn it around, you'll see two little hash marks here, and then you'll see one hash mark here. That should go down the center of the two, and you can see that is pretty much dead on. And so I feel very comfortable with that lineup. Should be nice and balanced. Now on to the fun part. We're going to get this up into the car, and we're going to bolt it up on each end, and this thing should run perfect after this. Let's get under the car. Torque specs once again, 60 Newton meters, about 45 foot-pounds of torque for any of the 19 millimeter bolts. And the 13 millimeter bolts are going to be 25 Newton meters, which is approximately 18 to 19 foot-pounds. It's 18.44, so I go about 19 foot-pounds on my torque wrench. One last thing that we're going to do before we put it up in there, and that's going to be to grease both of these ends right here. And we're going to basically grease the shaft that comes out from either the differential or transmission as well. And then we're going to go ahead and put this up in there. So let's get under the car. Okay, guys, quick fill-in. I basically went ahead and added each bolt to each side. I got my center support mounted in. Nothing is torqued yet, and these are all just hand tightened. And the reason why I got all those in is because I had to jack the transmission up a little bit to get this to align properly. And when I started to tighten these ones up, I went to the other side, because you want to do these in a star pattern of, once again, make sure your washer's on the outside on the inside pieces. So the ones that we put on prior to doing putting this in are the washer's gonna go on the back side with the bolt nut, and then the bolt's gonna go through with the washer with just a nut on the back side. So you want to make sure you don't mess that up, because that's gonna be the way it needs to rest based on the way that these basically inserts are. They're either sticking out or sticking in, and that's how it kind of drives itself together. So you want to basically make sure you torque these, but you want to tighten them. So if you want to tighten this one, then your top one, and then this one, and then over here. So you want to do it in a star pattern. And obviously you're going to have to spin your drive shaft. So the way that I spin my drive shaft is I have one wheel slightly up in the air over here, and I have jack stands and supports everywhere, because when you're working under this car, you're going to be shifting things around. Make sure you have tons and tons and tons of support. Chalk your wheels if you can. And in order to turn this, what I do is I keep the car in park and parking brake on while I'm tightening everything. Then I get out, put the car in neutral, take the parking brake off. From the outside, I spin the wheel, and that will turn your drive shaft. So you only need this one tire up because it is basically the way it works is this is the only tire that does the driving force through your differential. So real quick filling on that. Sorry if I went into too much detail. I just want to make sure you guys get this right. I'm going to go ahead and grab my torque wrench. It's a Pittsburgh torque wrench. I'll show you guys that real quick. And this is my torque wrench here. It was $9.99, and it is incredible. By far the best quality Pittsburgh tool that I've bought for the price. I mean, $9.99. This thing is extremely heavy. You can see here it's very easy to understand. You can set your foot-pounds, and I believe on the other side, yep, you have your Newton meters. So no matter which way you go, you can kind of match it up. Awesome, awesome tool. I will leave a link to this in the description because with all of the tools, with all of the parts on this, I was just over $200. Incredible savings compared to going to a dealership and having this type of work done. And it's enjoyable if you have the time and you have the space to do it. So let me get under the car. We're going to go ahead and torque down each one of these the way that I just explained it to you. All right, guys, so the drive shaft's up in there. Everything's torqued down. Wanted to note when torquing down the flex disc, I went around. I did the star pattern, and then I kept spinning it and kept tightening because I noticed as that sleeve kind of pops in, it'll give a little bit of play on the other side. So you got to make sure you go around a couple of times and just check to make sure they are torqued to spec. Next thing is we're going to be putting our exhaust. That is the final thing. Can't wait to get this up in there. I wanted to note that I picked up new bolts and nuts because these ones were pretty shot. Well, guys, it's all finished up. I'm absolutely covered in grease. I'm tired. The exhaust gave me a whole bunch of hell, but I got it up in there. I just want to let you guys know this is the first time I've ever done anything like this specifically on any of the Mercedes. So anything I've done in the past has been with assistance or had a shop do it. So I'm very excited. It's all up in there. Started the car up. Everything seems like it's going to run great. I have to call it a day. I did plan on putting the tires on and driving it down the road, but the tires that I need are actually on this car because I tried to do the other tires that we had picked up, which are the mono blocks, and for some reason they're just not fitting into the wheel well properly. So I'm gonna have to go back to those for now, and then I'll be able to take it for a ride. I'll give you guys an update in a next future video. Once again, my name's Pete. This is Pete's Carport. I hope I helped somebody out there. And if you guys have any questions about this, I learned a ton from pulling this drive shaft out, and I am so excited to share any information you guys need. If you guys like this video and any of the other videos I did, please subscribe if you're not already. Drop me a like. It really helps me out and encourages me to continue to do stuff like this so you guys can learn along with me. Have an awesome day, a great night, and a blessed week, guys.